Over the course of the past year, race has risen to the top of the American national agenda. As a nation, we watched a dialogue unfold and tensions materialize. From videos of police brutality to protests across college campuses, race relations and inclusion is an issue we cannot afford to ignore.
This isn't going to be solved overnight. This is something that is deeply rooted in our society. It's deeply rooted in our history.
Locally, the topic of race has been a hot-button topic here on our own campus. Last fall, the university community took to the streets in protest of the Eric Garner verdict. There on Main Street, people proclaimed the names of Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, and other black men who were killed at the hands of police. With the death of Sandra Bland and others to follow, the issue intensified.
Get out of the car!
And then
I will light you up! Get out!
Wow.
Now!
Wow.
Get out of the car!
For a failure to signal.
Students continued their activism through the spring semester by hosting die-ins and creating The Real UDel, a Twitter account that highlights experiences that are otherwise overlooked. The fall semester rolled around, and the activists quickly went to work with the silent protest of the Katie Palvick lecture. Students protested Ms. Palvick's hurtful statements towards African Americans. Less than 48 hours later, students were horrified by the discovery of 3 noose-like items that were displayed where they peacefully protested. It was later determined that these items were remnants of a lantern. That event prompted a powerful discussion of race, inclusion, and issues that Black students face on this campus.
There was an actual noose sighting and experience back in, I think, 2007, 2008, right? And then so what we experienced recently, right? I'm thinking about institutional memory, like, oh my God, like, this is, so University of Delaware does have a rich legacy of racism and or contentious relationship with Black life and or the Black community in other parts of Delaware, including Wilmington, right? That is a long and rich legacy here at UD. Right? But it almost feels as if, right, particularly with the recent incident, it almost feels as if, but for maybe that experience, everything, here more or less has been hunky-dory. It can feel that way.
UD's diversity problem is easier to see when you look at the numbers. Over 22,000 students were enrolled at the University of Delaware in 2014. But out of all the racial minority groups on campus, the largest group, Asians, made up only 11% of its total racial composition, and Black people made up only 5% of the total racial composition. Meanwhile, Black people made up 22% of the state of Delaware's racial composition. The problem is even more obvious when you listen to some of the stories students have told about their personal experiences with racism on this campus.
Not one of those 4 years that I ever go through a semester where I wasn't called a nigger or heard racial slurs like porch monkey, a tar baby. And outside of this campus, not one day goes by where I don't see another Black teen gunned down by a policeman on a news station.
Being a Chinese major, in fact, I've experienced white privilege firsthand. At my job interview, I was the only Black person because not that many people speak Chinese in the first place, let alone a person who's Black. So when I went in there, they looked at me funny, and they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't think you were Black. And what I wanted to say was, what does me being Black have to do with my level of experience, have to do with my proficiency in Chinese?
He lost in the video game, and verbatim what he said as soon as he was done was, oh nigger.
My experiences on this campus is very it's centered around race a lot. It doesn't matter what environment I can be in on this campus. I could be at the dining hall with my friends, and somebody could be having a rough day because they had to deal with some type of microaggression, or they've had to confront somebody on using racial slurs.
I mean, it's like an everyday thing you run into, especially because we're at a predominantly white institution. You have to try twice as hard to get half as less. The way it kind of plays out here at UD is, my white counterpart and I could work this as diligently as we want in an organization that we're involved in or in a department that we're involved in, but because they are white, they'll get recognition for it.
There will be times where I'll be in a class and it will just be me as the one black person, and they might be mentioning things like that, the prominent things that have been happening lately on campus, and the class will look directly at me to answer. And of course I want to answer, but I don't want to be the only person who can answer those questions.
Between the events on the green, UD's extremely low rate of minority enrollment, and students' stories of prejudice on our very own campus, it was obvious that a conversation about race needed to be had. This conversation began on a smaller scale with the National Agenda Fall Speaker Series, the topic of which was Race in America. Taught by Professor Lindsay Hoffman, the class brought in 7 speakers, each involved in the movement to break down systematic racism.
Yeah, no, I'm hopeful that students will organize and continue to put pressure on the university to create space where these conversations about race are really robust and that lead to actual systemic changes here.
Many of the speakers held influential roles in the media or political world, and not only allowed us to link the problems of our campus to national issues involving race, but also gave us historical context for some of the problems that we still face to this day.
If you see a bumper sticker sitting on my car that says, "Save the rainforest," it doesn't mean I'm saying, "Fuck the other forests." It means the rainforests are getting cut down very quickly, and there's a big problem with that. I care about the other forests too. Okay? So when you see Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean, oh, we don't care about anybody else. It means shit is happening to black people in ways that ain't happening to you guys.
After being inspired by the powerful words of so many amazing speakers, we decided to take it upon ourselves to further examine the state of race on our campus.
People talk about white privilege, but what is white privilege? People talk about symbolic racism, but what is symbolic racism? So from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester is about working through and understanding the terms, the context, the history, all of these things that are entangled in this conversation.
We decided to ask UD students about white privilege in order to see how aware college students were about issues involving race. White privilege is an inherent set of advantages that white people have, based on the color of their skin and place in society.
A part of white privilege is not knowing that you have it. White privilege is the ability to live in a bubble.
Honestly, I think I'm kind of blind to it versus a non-white person.
White privilege is kind of the unspoken advantage that white Americans have. I never have to worry about being discriminated against in professional settings and school settings and personal relationships.
White privilege is when white people can experience things without worrying about being excluded because of the color of their skin.
I think it just means that unfortunately there are some certain benefits that being white gives you.
I don't know if I have experienced white privilege on campus and recognized it for myself. I would say that have not been exposed to it personally.
I would agree. I don't think I've really experienced it too much on campus. It might be present and we might have benefited from it, but it's just kind of something that I don't realize or just recognize day to day.
White privilege, I mean, it's simple. It's basically because you have or you don't have any melanin or skin color, you don't have to go through the situations that others do, such as, getting pulled over by the cops just because there was suspicion.
Many of the people we interviewed seemed to have a good grasp on the concept of white privilege, but this left us confused, as we have also seen instances of racism on anonymous social media sites like Yik Yak.
We can't claim to be an excellent institution without being inclusive. And it does a disservice to you all as students if you do not have the experience of being educated in an environment that mirrors the world that you'll be entering.
Is the problem that some students are just secretly racist behind closed doors? Or is this a more complicated issue than we originally thought? Maybe the problem is that while some white students actually do understand the concept of white privilege, they choose not to engage in any type of meaningful dialogue. There's good evidence to believe people are well-intentioned, but just don't feel equipped to have these difficult yet necessary conversations.
White privilege cocoons people, and folks assume that what's happening to other groups of people does not impact me. And so it's easy to disconnect. African American males are being shot, so why should I care? We've made it a race thing, and it is a race thing, but it's also about human decency. And so then I begin to question, do you see the humanity in other groups of people? That's what I begin to question.
As students, this course has opened our eyes to the issues of race and inclusion on our campus. As students and leaders, we have actively sought a change and challenged the administration of this institution. Though the National Agenda series, Race in America, only lasted this semester, the conversation will definitely continue. As participants of the class, we have gained knowledge that inspired us to hold tough conversations on race, equity, and inclusion. We challenge you, the viewer, and the rest of our campus community to approach conversations of race and acceptance with respect and an open mind. Though on the outside we are marked by the color of our skin, we are bound by the flow of our blood.